Hello everyone, and welcome back to the How to Make a Five Nights at Freddy's 2 tutorial in Scratch. This is part 2. Let's get started. In this episode, we will be covering the fade, the newspaper, the night screen, office scrolling, and vent lights and hall light. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to set up is obviously the fade and your newspaper. So let's do that. So, our newspaper is going to be set in a screen button, along with our night screens. So, let's get started. Let's make a sprite, and we're going to call this night screen and newspaper. I will upload the files for this. Again, if you want the files that I'm using from the actual game, you can go into the link in the description and download the episode 2 folder. I highly recommend you make your own sprites though for your own game. So, I will drag in my night screens plus the newspaper. Alright, as you see here, we have night 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the actual newspaper. I'm changing my size to 101, as some of my sprites shrink in size a little bit as I export them. Anyways, so let's get to programming. So the first thing we need to do is say, when I receive menu, we will hide and stop other scripts in this sprite. Now, when we receive game news or game.news, we will first of all clear all graphical effects. Then we will grab an if-else statement and we will check if our night is equal to 1, meaning it's the first night, because we're only going to show the newspaper on the first night. So if it is on the first night, we will switch our costume to 272 or newspaper. You can switch the name of it. That's really up to you. Whatever's easier for you to understand. And then we will say go to front layer. We will set our brightness effect to 0. We will set our ghost effect to 100 so that it will appear invisible. We will choose where it goes, the size that we want it set to, and then, and only then, will we show. After we show, since it will be invisible, we will need to repeat 100 times, in which case we will go to the front layer and change the ghost effect by -1. -1 times 100 is -100, so therefore it will switch our ghost effect from 100 to -100, which will make it, or I guess 0, not -100, it'll set it to 0, which will make the sprite visible, which is what we want it to do. I'm using 100 so that it transitions and fades really slowly. The smaller this number you make, the bigger this number has to be, as long as it'll equal out to 0. And you could make the fade faster or slower. Then, we will, afterwards, how long you want it on the screen. You could even say, wait until the mouse is clicked. But if you want to say, we'll do that. We'll say, we'll wait until mouse down. And then I will wait until not mouse down. Just like that. And then we will switch the costume to night. And this will switch it to whichever night screen we need to be on. Inside of this else, we will say wait 0.1 seconds and broadcast news.showed to mention that the news has been showed. Then we'll come to our variables and set the screen status to in game to let us know that we are in game. Then we can clear graphic effects, stop all sounds, and then we can make a broadcast called game.start. We will be seeing this broadcast a lot. Then we can wait 0.1 seconds, and we can hide. There we go. Let's take a look at what that looks like. We press new game. It loads to our screen. And then when we click, it said first night. We want it to sit on that first night screen a little bit longer, I'd say. So what we can do is we can say, wait 3 seconds. Say we want to be on that screen after switching to the night screen. Let's take a look again. Click. Sets the thing to first night. Fantastic. Now, I think it looked a little bit jank when it switched to the night screen. I think we need to add that static. You know, it flashes some static when we switch to this camera screen. So what we can do is we can make a broadcast right above the screen status change. We can make a broadcast right above, right after the switch costume to night, and name it camera change. We will come back to camera change when we're using our camera buttons to refer to our static lines, but we're also going to use it here since it will play the exact same effect. Come to your static lines and grab a when I receive camera.change. We will go to the front layer, and now we need a sound. So we'll go to sounds and I'll drag in the sound I need. You can find a sound too. Here is mine. Great. So we will start that sound. We will go to 0, 0. We will set the size to what we need it to be set to. 100. You'll switch the costume to the first one. Or you can pick one if you want. You can pick 66, 68. Doesn't really matter. 66 works fine for me. Say 66. We will wait 0.01 seconds. We will switch the costume to pick random. I'm going to say 2 to 3. You see we have 3 costumes here. So if it starts on this one, I don't want it to pick this one or this one. I wouldn't want it to repick the same one. So 2 or 3. Switch costume to 2 or 3. Wait another 0.01 seconds. And then we will hide. Fantastic, just like that. Let's take a look. New game. And as you click, it switches there. It didn't show for me because I forgot to throw in a show. Forgot to throw in a show. So let's take a look at that again. There, as you saw, it went just like that. So, if you want to make it a little bit better and not have the menu sound play, you can come to your night screen, and right before camera change, you can say stop all sounds. Take a look again. Great. Okay. Inside of our menu characters where the sound plays, we can say, when I receive camera change, we can again stop all sounds and then stop other scripts in this sprite to prevent the menu music from continuing to play. Let's take a look one more time. Great. And don't forget in your static lines, right above here, to throw in a 0.01 to give the menu screen time to stop all sounds again, so that it doesn't stop the sound that's going to play by putting that 0.01 in there. Fantastic. The next thing we will add is the office. So let's make a new sprite, and we will call it office. I will drag in my office sprites that are needed. For now, there will be plenty more than this. These are just the ones we're using for this tutorial. We have one where all the lights are off, one where the right vent light is on, one where the right left vent light is on, and then I forgot to grab the middle light for the vent hole. There we go. Okay, so each of these are named very specifically for a very specific reason. You can see that our 000 has all the lights off. 001 has a right vent, 100 has the left vent, and 010 has the hall light. If you haven't figured out the pattern, I'll tell you. 0 equals no light, and 1 equals light. 000, the 3 digits, equate to the left light, middle light, right light. So 000, they're all off. 001, that means the right light should be on, and it is, and so on and so forth. And we need to keep those named that way because that's how we'll call to these sprites later. So once we have all those in, we can continue. So the office, when I receive menu, will hide, of course, and it will also stop other scripts in this sprite from being able to run. When I receive game start, which is what we will be using a lot, we will need to say repeat until, and inside we'll put an if statement, and we'll say equals, and we're going to make a variable called camera up. We're not going to use this variable very much in this tutorial since we're not focusing on cameras, but this will be very important later, so we're setting it up now. If camera up equals 0, we will show. If it's not, we will hide. Sorry, you might hear a cat sometimes. We got a little cat up here. He's kind of loud. Now we will grab another when I receive game start. This will decide what variable or what costume that we are switching to. So what we're going to do is this is where we'll decide the costume that it's going to choose. So repeat until, we're going to grab an if else and put it inside. Inside of the else, we are going to switch costume to, and we're going to make a variable called office code. We're going to switch the costume to office code. There will be a lot more in this else, and that will depend on if there's an animatronic standing in front of you in their attack mode. Since that doesn't exist yet, for right now, it's just going to be switching to the office code for now. This will be changed later when we get to animatronic attacks. Let's continue. So now let's focus on the movement of the office. We will grab a when I receive game.start, and we can start going. So what we can do is we can say show, and we can say go to 0, 0. We're not going to use this variable during this tutorial, but we will use it later. So we're going to program it now so we don't have to come back to it later. We're going to make a variable called mask up, and we will set mask up to 0. Again, we're not going to program the mask this tutorial, but we will in a later one, and we don't want to have to come back and set this, so we're setting it now. Great. Inside of a repeat until loop, we will say go to front layer, and then also go backward 1,000 layers. That sounds weird, but it's a setup that will put the office where it needs to be. Now we will grab an if-else statement and put it inside. We need 3 ORs, so let's throw 3 ORs in just like this, and grab an equals and put it inside, and we're checking for office code. If the office code equals 100, or the left light is on, if office code equals 101, the middle light is on, or equals 001, the right light is on, then we will have to check if equals, we're going to make a variable called camera. Again, we're not setting up cameras, we are just using camera to also indicate if we're in an office, because if our camera is not being used, we'll set the camera to office, so it's easier for multiple sprites to read at a time. So set it to office. If it is, we will set the volume to 50, else set the volume to 0. This is because when our light is on, which is what we're checking here, if any of these lights are on, we will obviously need to make a sound. which we will get to later. Now we will grab an if statement and put it inside and say if camera up equals 0, then we will check an if else statement and say greater than. If mouse X is greater than -95, this will be completely varied on how big your office is, which you should set the size. So I find that 160 tends to work well. You might have to go larger. And 160 might not even work if you're using Scratch, which has a very limited size value. You might have to make a sizer, which a sizer is just a little dot that's a variable, and you call it sizer. And then what you could do is say switch costume to sizer, set the size to what you need it to be, and then you switch it to your office to get the size you need. If you're using Turbo Warp, you have the option of going to your advanced settings and clicking remove fencing, which allows your sprites to be whatever size they want, and then hitting store settings and project, which allows you to make the size of your sprites whatever size you want with no limit to it. And 160 works great for me. So, fantastic. So, these settings are going to be very, very different depending on the size of your office. If you want to copy my office size exactly without using my exact, art, because you want to make your own art, you can see here that the size of the office is 479 by 229. So if you want to copy my settings exactly but have your own art, make sure that the sizes of your costumes are 479 by 299 and you'd get the same size. Otherwise, checking this out is going to be a little difficult for you. What we're doing is we're checking where your mouse is to choose how quickly and how fast we're going to be scrolling the screen. So what it's checking is if our mouse X is greater than -95. So -95 is about right here. It's around right here. This is where -95 is. If it's greater than it, meaning it's anywhere over here, what we will be doing is we'll check if not and put a less than symbol. We're checking if the office's X position is not greater than a -95, because it can't be. If we set X to -95, we'll see that's the very edge of the screen over here. I think we can actually go a little bit more, like -100, -200. See, -200 is too far. -150, a little too much. -140. That still shows the office, which really, in theory, works for us. 39 moves it a little bit closer in. It's all about testing and stuff like this. So I'll say that. We'll say 139. However far your office can scroll is obviously the maximum amount it's allowed to. So we see 139 is the same on the opposite side. If that is the case, then we will decide how quickly it's going to move. So I'll do change X by -15 because we're super far over, so we gotta move the screen quickly. The further our mouse is over to the side of the screens, the faster it will move. The closer to the middle, the slower it will move. Inside of this else, I'm just going to duplicate what we made and put it inside of the else, just like that. And then the next one I'll check is if it's greater than 50, which 50 is right around here. Right here is 50. If it's greater than 50, then we'll check if it's not less than the largest amount, and we'll say -5, slowing it down a little bit. We'll duplicate it again, and this time we're checking if it's smaller. If it's smaller than -95, where we wanted it, we'll check again if it's not too big, and we will say 15. And then we'll do it one more time, and we're checking if it's greater than 50, making sure it's not too big, just 5. And then we can close off this if. So, don't forget that on your game start, you should also be setting the size. So in my case, it's 160. So, before we can test this out, we need to come to our menu characters, and we need to make a when I receive game start, we will need to make a variable and call it no menu. And we will set no menu to yes. Once the game starts, we're not on the menu, so we set no menu to yes. Then also, when we receive game start, we will need to stop other scripts in the sprite. We will set the volume to 0. We will hide. Fantastic. Then we also need to make sure that in our new game button, when we receive news showed, right, when the news has been shown, we will need to hide it, and that goes into our continue night button as well. And that can also go into our menu arrow button. Not necessary, but I do it anyways. And then inside of our night screen sprite, you can broadcast news showed and put it above that game start. And now let's take a look and see how it works. Hit new game. Get our night screen. And our office shows. And we can see that the scrolling isn't quite working how we need it to, so let's do some adjusting to our buttons. Inside of our static, in this else that we made last time, we'll set the ghost effect to 100. Fantastic. I realize our continue button didn't hide when it should have. Oh, yes, of course. When receive menu showed. Also, don't forget to stop other scripts in this sprite to stop these from working. And then inside of our office sprite, we need to make sure that these bottom two are positives and not negatives. All right, let's take a second look. Let's take a look. Okay, cool. We hit new game. And then we click. Now we can see that this shows up. We still have some static line problems, so let's fix those. Inside of our static lines, let's say when game night start occurs, we will hide and stop other scripts in the sprite. Same with our moving static line. Right? Fantastic. And as far as our office scrolling now working, as you see, I've adjusted my numbers a little bit because I was realizing that there was white bars on the sides of my screen, so I adjusted these. All you'll need to do to fix this is come down to these positive numbers and make sure that these equations are set to greater than symbols and not less than symbols. These last two should be greater than. These first two should be less than. Let's hop in and see again. Hit new game. It loads. First night shows as it should. And now you see that as we move our mouse across, the office scrolls dependent on where our mouse is. Fantastic. Now, if you're using Turbo Warp, we can get rid of the choppy look of this, and I'll show you how to do that. If you're using Turbo Warp, which I highly recommend you do, you can go up to the advanced setting and click Interpolation. And now if we run the game and load it, you'll see that the movement of the office looks much, much smoother. All because of that interpolation, adding frames between frames. Highly recommend you use Turbo Warp. I plan on making tutorials specifically in Turbo Warp. In fact, I have one in the works right now. Turbo Warp has so many more options that you can use, and it is much less limiting than Scratch. So, fantastic. Let's continue. We will take camera up, right-click it, and change it to an if-else. Inside of this else statement, we will put a go to 0, 0. If the camera's up, the office will just go to the center of the screen. Fantastic. Underneath this else statement, we will grab an if-else statement and put it underneath, just like that. Again, really make sure you know where you're putting this, because I feel like a lot of the times when I get comments from people saying, this doesn't work for me, it's usually because you placed one of these little loops in the wrong spot. It needs to be right underneath this go to 0, 0, there should be a line, and then your next if statement starts. Great. Now we will grab an and this is where you'll decide where your hall light button should be used. So you can choose space, you can choose anything you want. If you're using turbo warps, you can use control, like how the actual game uses. I'm going to use space, but again, if you want control, which you definitely can do, if you're using turbo warp, control is an open option to you. So definitely go for it if you want to. Otherwise, a space works just as well. We're going to make a variable called power. Again, we're not going to necessarily use this in this episode, but it will be used later. So we're going to program this part of it in now. You'll check if power is greater than 0, meaning you have power to use. We are also going to make a variable called flashlight usable to check if you're allowed to use the flashlight at the moment. If you're wondering why you wouldn't be able to, aside from power, that also includes Balloon Boy. If Balloon Boy is in your room, you're not allowed to use it. So we will grab an else statement, if else, and say if flashlight usable equals 1, then we will have to check a few things. We will have to grab an if else, and we'll have to check an and, because we're checking two things here. We're checking if not mask up equals 1. So if your mask isn't up, and we'll grab an equals and put 0 in the second bubble. We're going to make a variable for Balloon Boy being in your office. Again, we are not actually programming Balloon Boy, but we don't want to have to come back later to make this work. So we'll make a sprite called Balloon Boy in office, and we will need to check if Balloon Boy in office equals 0, therefore he is not in the office. That's what 0 will mean. So we're going to put one more if else statement in here, and there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff in here as we keep going, but the thing you'll want to keep track of is that this final else statement, the one at the way bottom, should set office code to 0, 1, 0. Okay, so right now just put it in like that, and we'll deal with this if else later. Just put that in there like that. The stuff that will be in here besides 0, 1, 0 will be iterations of animatronics being in the hall. Like you turn the light on and Toy Chica's in the hall. We'll need to check if Toy Chica's in the hall first, and if nobody's in the hall, only then can we switch it to 0, 1, 0, which is an empty hallway light. If that's a bit confusing, I'm sorry. It will make sense later as the tutorial goes on. So we can go ahead and set this to an if, because we don't really need that to do anything else. So in the else half of this if flashlight usable, in here we will set the office code to 0, 0, 0, meaning no light is on anywhere. Now, inside of the else statement of the if key space is pressed, we will decide if our vent lights are on, which we haven't even touched yet. So let's get to our vent lights. So let's get into our light buttons. I'm going to start with the left light button. So let's make a new sprite and call it left light button. I'm going to implement the sprites or the costumes for it. See here we have 0 and 1 for off and on. And let's get to programming. Obviously, when we receive menu, we will hide, and we'll go ahead and stop other scripts in the sprite. Good way to start any good sprite. Now, for this button, when I receive game.start, we will clear any graphic effects, and now we will grab a repeat until. Inside of this repeat until, we will say go to front layer, and then go backwards 20 layers. This will get it into the correct position with all other things that can possibly show up. Now we'll set the size to what we want it to do. I find 55 works for me. Your button may be a little different. And then we will choose how we go to the place of the location that it needs to be in. So I already know what mine is for me. Yours will be messing around and figuring it out for yourself. So what I'm going to do is say in this X, I'll do minus 310. And then I will grab a backdrop number of stage and change stage to office. And then choose the X position of office minus 310. And then where it is on the Y front, minus negative 19. Again, this is all going to be just messing around with numbers. It totally depends on the sizes of your sprites. There's no way for me to tell you exactly what you need. It will be messing around with this type of an equation right here. Definitely use this equation right here. X position of office minus a specific number, and then a Y position. So yours should really look like this, and you figure out this number and this number for yourself. I know that mine is 310 specifically. Yours, depending on the sizes of your sprite, will be different. Then we'll grab an if else, and we'll grab a greater than symbol. And I'll say if the X position is greater than negative 240, we will show, if else will hide. This will make sure that if the button is off screen, it will hide. And if it's not, then it will show. So let's test that out real quick. As the office loads in, before we check, I'm going to take the go to front layer out of the office so that it doesn't interfere with our light button. So let's take a look. New game. And we get into the night. And as we scroll over to the side, we'll see that the button is there. It is flickering, which we can fix pretty easily. But as you see, it is in the right area that it needs to be in. It's just flickering a little bit. So to fix this problem, if we just temporarily take this backward layers out, you'll see that the problem is fixed. And if we need to add some backwards layers later on, we can definitely do that. So there we go. The light follows the office just as it should. Fantastic. Let's continue making this light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate what we have already, and I'm going to call this right light button. I'm going to replace the buttons with the opposite side, obviously, and rename them 0 and 1. And we're going to program this one basically the exact same way, where in game start, it does everything that it needs to do here, sets its size, and X position, this is just going to change to a plus. The number should stay exactly the same, considering that the office is pretty symmetrical. You might have to change a little bit here and there, but overall, it should be pretty fine if you set it to this. And you're going to change this to a less than symbol, and then we'll see if we run the game, and we come to a transition to the office. So here's this light, and we come to the other side, and there's our left light, right light, and left light. Okay, let's head back to our left light and continue programming how our left light works. So what we'll need to check is we will see if, we'll grab an equals, and we will go to sensing and grab this backdrop number of, switch stage to the opposite light, so right light, and switch costume number and do 2. And remember, the second costume of the lights are when they're on or when they're green, right? So if the other light is on, this light can't be on, so we change it to 0 to show that it is off, right? If the other light is on, this light is off. Understand? Fantastic. Let's grab an if-else statement and put it underneath the if we just placed down. And we will check an and. And in this and, we will check if the mask up equals 0 and balloon boy in office equals 0, right? Mask can't be up, and balloon boy in the office can't be there. Then what we will need to do is, oh, I just realized we put this in the wrong area. Around this repeat until, or around this if else statement, so you can put this in here like this. We need to check if we're touching mouse pointer and the mouse is down. So we click it. First we click the button, and then we check if the mask is up. If both of these are true, we set it to 1. If else, we switch it to 0. And then if else again, we switch it to 0 right there. Next, we need to check if camera up equals 1, meaning the camera is up. We will switch the costume to 0. And then we need to check, pull out an if statement. We need to check if, we need to pull out an equals, and we need to grab a backdrop number of stage, switch stage to office, and choose costume name. If costume name of office is 010, meaning that the middle light is on, we will switch our costume to 0 because it can't be on if the middle light is on. You can only have one light on at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab everything we just put after that, and we're going to drag it right to the right light button. We're going to grab this right light button, and we're going to put it right underneath. And the only things we're going to switch around here, we're not going to switch around too much. We're going to switch right light button to left light button. This all stays the same. This all stays the same. And there we go. Now we'll be able to see that the lights should change sprites as we click them. See, it turns on as we hold it down. Come to the other side, it turns on as we hold it down. If we have our middle light on, we can't turn on our lights. Fantastic. Hop on over to our office, and right around here, what we're going to do is inside of this else statement at the bottom here, we're going to run an if else. We're going to say if, put an equal sign in here, go to our sensing, and we'll grab the backdrop number of. We'll check left light first. So we'll say if the costume number of left light equals 2, then we will set our office code to 100 to show that the left light is on. I'll duplicate this, and we'll check the right light button. Check if that's equal to it, and if not, we'll do 001, or else we'll set the office code to 000. You may have noticed an office scrolling problem that whenever you try to shine your light, your office all of a sudden doesn't want to scroll anymore. As we see here, I made a very simple mistake. Right here, we're checking if the office code here, we're going to grab this camera up and put it underneath that else statement, not inside, underneath. And that should fix your office not scrolling problem. Let's go ahead and let's hop in and test it out. See if we find any problems. Load in here, we press the light. Okay, we see that when we press the left light over here, the left light turns on. And as we press space, the middle light turns on. We can't turn the light on if our middle light is on. If we have this one clicked and we press space, it shuts off our light as it should. But we see over here when we click this light, it lights up, but the vent isn't actually turning on. Let's figure out why. As we see down here with the right light button, we have it set to X position. If we just switch that over to costume number, we should see that as we click it, it switches the light just as it should. Fantastic. We have our vent lights and our hall light all working as it should. Fantastic. Next thing we're going to set up is the desk, the actual desk that sits in the middle of the office. You might have noticed I didn't put the desk in there. It's because the desk is actually a separate asset, so let's throw it in there real quick. Let's make a new sprite. We're just going to call it desk. And I'll drag in my desk costumes. So here I've dragged in the office desk. It has 4 frames for the fan moving. Let's program this. This shouldn't be too hard. When I receive menu, we will hide and stop other scripts in the sprite. Then, upon game starting, so game.start, we will show it and repeat until. Grab an if else and put it inside. grab a knot, put an equals inside the knot, and check if mask up does not equal 1. We will show, go to front layer, set size, pick what you want. I find that 65 works for me, may be different for you depending on the size. And then we will go to, put a plus inside, go to sensing, and choose office and X position. I find 90 works for me. Again, this is just like the lights. It'll totally depend on how it works for you. And then negative 100. And then also next costume, since it is a fan that has an animation, so we'll put next costume in there, and then we'll throw hide inside. And that's really all you need. Let's take a look, see how that looks. And as the night loads up and the office loads, we'll see that the fan is now in the position that it should be, and it is moving and animating the fan. Fantastic. And everything else works just as it should. Great. And that is all I have time for this tutorial. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've liked it and found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you all in part 3. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.